everybody, I'm Emma Berman, I'm a wedding photographer, and today I'm going to be talking about composition. I'm going to tell you about some different types of composition and how to be intentional when you're photographing so that you're creating photos that look professional and have a look that is very clean and fits with some of these rules of composition or intentionally breaks them. The first type of composition I want to go over is a very basic one, rule of thirds. And I'm going to show you guys some examples of not so great not following rule of thirds, and then what happens when you do follow rule of thirds. So in this first photo here, you can see this beautiful bride sitting here getting her shoes on, and it's almost perfectly centered. Now, this doesn't follow the rule of thirds because the rule of thirds would have her, boom, there, down in the bottom third. And this overall just creates a more pleasing image. Here, I'll show you that before and after again. To me, this looks wrong, imbalanced, maybe even kind of amateurish. And this to me looks like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a professional photo. Here's another example. This is a photo that I don't think looks bad by any means, having it centered like this, but there is something just way more satisfying and pleasing to the eye to have her over in the left third there. The couple I know is off to her left, my right. I'll use the mouse. The couple is over this direction. And so that's why she is slightly angled that way. She's speaking to the bride and groom. And so because of that, I put her in the left third. You want to make sure whichever way that they're facing, wherever they are speaking, that you have them with their backs to the edge of the photo here. Here's a film photo from a wedding this year. We've got this lovely couple here up at the ceremony spot, exchanging vows, looking adorable. And it just looks kind of funky, which to the untrained eye or somebody who maybe hasn't learned about rule of thirds, this might just be like, hey, cute, look at that couple. And you might not even notice composition wise, it feels a little off. But then if you go boom and pop them down in that bottom third, it's a much more compositionally pleasing photo. Next up, ta-da! Negative space, which a lot of times also falls in with rule of thirds. But this is an example of a photo that has the subject down in this bottom area, kind of bottom third, bottom half maybe. And the top portion is just a whole lot of blank, and it's obviously not the subject, that top portion. So there's a lot of negative space in this photo, but it almost adds to the subject. It almost makes the subject that much more poignant because you are drawn immediately to the subject because there's nothing at all competing for attention unless you find sheer drapes extremely captivating. Compositionally, you can use negative space to draw even more attention to your subject. It makes it bolder, and it does give it just a bit more of a higher artistic kind of look. Same with this. There's a lot of negative space, a lot of dark spots in this image that are lost in shadow. It makes the parts that are bathed in sunlight even more captivating. This one's just a really basic example one. It's not a stock photo. I did take this one, but this isn't anything all that artsy. It's just a plane in the sky, but this is a really great example of negative space and rule of thirds. I have the plane down in the bottom third, more toward the bottom left corner. And then we have just a whole bunch of sky. So that one's pretty self-explanatory, but that's probably the simplest, most straightforward way to demonstrate negative space. An example of a photo that has negative space that can elevate the look of a photo is taking this and instead doing this, which I really love because not only does it just, I don't know, to me create more of a higher more professional looking photo because you have even more depth in the image, but it also it does an awesome job of displaying the venue. And it was this really incredible chateau. The couple was very excited about this location. We all were. And so I like the idea of using it in this negative space here because it highlights it a bit, even though the focus still very much is on the couple having their dessert there. Next composition topic, leading lines. Leading lines are things in an image, usually lines or some sort of shape or object that draws your attention to the subject. So in this instance, it's this bride's super long cathedral veil. The veil itself is leading our eyes straight to this couple. I think leading lines can be really helpful if you're trying to really make sure people's attention is drawn to something, especially if it's in a busy enough environment where, you know, with the airplane in the sky, you don't really need leading lines. Your eye is already automatically drawn to that airplane. There's no doubt what the subject is. But in some other things, leading lines can be a really great way of just reinforcing or restating, I guess, what the subject is. And it makes it just a visually more interesting photo. And this veil very much does the job of drawing our attention to this couple. And it kind of frames them too. So a little bit of framing there for you. This one definitely has a lot of leading lines. This was actually a really cool moment. It was at a wedding and we weren't even ever doing any photos in this area, which made me so sad. But one of the times we were passing by it, this was the road to get into the venue. And I was like, this is just way too cool. And I just snapped a photo real quick as we were passing by. And I was like, oh, I want to take pictures there, guys. But we had a pretty strict timeline. I love this photo as an example for leading lines, because not only do we have tire tracks leading us down this road, but you can see that the path narrows, showing that it's getting further away. And these trees provide a really nice accentuation to the road that they are also gradually getting further away, like that they are creating lines as well. Even just these lines here, everything in this image is being brought back to this part. Like if there was a person standing at the end of the road right here, this image would be like a perfect example of leading lines bringing your attention to a subject. So pretend there's just a person right here, and then I think it would be clear to everyone that that's where your attention is supposed to be. Another great, easy example of leading lines is most wedding ceremonies. I say most and not all because there are some where the chairs are all kerbobbled and the couple's off center, and maybe there's just enough asymmetry going on that it doesn't really lead to the subject very well. Like it looks too crooked or unbalanced or whatever. But this one is pretty darn good. So we have our two rows on either side, or our two chunks of audience, the two sides of the audience here, and this aisle, and that leads your eye straight to the couple, which thankfully your eye is already brought there anyway, because they're, you know, front and center and in wedding attire, which helps. But this center aisle, the way that it narrows in on them, is an example of leading lines bringing your attention to your subject. So if you ever like, I need an easy example of leading lines, ceremony's a great place to look. The next one is framing. Here we are in this hotel room on Lake Como, and we've got the bride's dress hanging up in this cool old looking window with these awesome, super heavy curtains. It was so cool. But I loved the idea of putting the dress in the window. And for me, I'm not a big fan of doing dress shots if there's not like a compelling, beautiful location for them to be, because otherwise I'm like, well, we'll see it plenty on the bride. I personally don't think that hanging dress photos are like a must-have, but if you have the right circumstances, the right backdrop, the right framing, I think they can make for very beautiful photos. Like this one, in my opinion, I think is stunning. You see Lake Como behind. And I brought the highlights down quite a bit so that we wouldn't lose that detail of outside. And then I did a bit of masking to bring a little bit more brightness to the room, but I also wanted there to be more contrast in this photo, so I kept it pretty dark inside. But yeah, this window and the curtains and everything are an example of framing your subject with the objects that are around you. Another obvious one, also Lake Como, it's this really cool archway at Villa Balbianello. It was hard. There were a lot of people, and people gave us like a minute to quickly grab this shot, and they like waited, which was so sweet and so incredible that I didn't want to like take too long and, you know, be all self-centered and entitled. So I tried to be pretty quick, but in hindsight, I'm like, I should have tried to back up more if I could, and then shoot holding my camera up even higher so that there's a little bit less negative space here, and it framed them a little bit lower, just because I feel like we're kind of losing the top up here. Like, I mean, you can see a little bit, but it just, anyway, but that also is kind of cool negative space, so it could be a statement in a way. But yeah, in hindsight, I would shoot further back and hold my camera up higher to get that slightly different angle. Now this one's an example of framing that is a little bit more subtle. If none of this foliage or anything was there, if the tree was gone, if the plants and everything, then it would be very obvious and clear framing, because we have this, this wrought iron gate around this this stone archway thing, and that's very obvious intentional framing. But the trees and the foliage and everything also kind of provide some framing of their own. It's not as defined or anything, but it is a subtler way of framing an image, which is kind of cool, because sometimes doing the obvious thing like this archway, it can feel a little too on the nose. Maybe you want to be someone that's a little bit more subtle, a little more quirky, a little more, goes off the beaten path kind of thing. So this is an example of framing in a way that's super subtle, and maybe you don't even really think about it being framing. Whereas this one, it's like, they're framed by the archway, of course, it's obvious. So I really like this one, especially because the model's arms are out like that, and so it just drew attention to the width of the doorway and everything. And overall, I really like this image because it's more subtle about its framing, but I still think it looks really cool. All right, last category is balance, symmetry, patterns even. Balance in a photo is where you're not letting things be unequal in a way. So like, for example, this photo, I very well could have just shot the couple, from around the feet up, and it would still make an awesome image. However, I saw their shadows hitting the ground here, and I was like, that's pretty cool. It's not probably perfectly the same dimensions because of the angle of the sun. It looks a little skewed, kind of funhouse mirror skewed, but still close enough where I felt like capturing both them and their shadows would create this really cool symmetry, this really cool balanced photo. I kept them over in the left half of the photo just to be kind of more creative. So shadows are a great example of something you can use to create a photo that has balance or symmetry. On a similar note, reflections. This was just a really cool situation where the sand here had just enough of a layer of water on it to create this really cool reflection, and they weren't even like they were walking on sand basically, but it was just enough water to create a pretty cool reflection of them here. Again, same thing with like the balance, we have them on this top half, but they're balanced out by their reflection on the bottom half, and it's this cool symmetry where it matches each other, so it's creating like a pattern and a balance. Same with this one. This one definitely pattern. We have different like windows, different doorways here, and that creates this cool pattern, which then also has some symmetry because it's the same on either side for the most part. And it just makes for an interesting photo because you're creating these repetitive shapes, repetitive look that makes it interesting to the eye, because it seems is not the easiest thing to find in nature always. So it's extra cool when it's in nature. It's a little easier when it's a, a building like this that obviously they built these windows and these openings to be the same size as each other, but still really cool and makes for a very interesting photo. Here's an example of some balance. I've got this model's reflection in the window here, and that's creating sort of a balance with her actual person here. So that's why this is framed the way it was. If she was the only subject of the photo and I didn't have a reflection here, I would not have her put on this left side of the photo like that. That would be weird. But because we have her reflection here, I can put her more on the left because then her reflection balances it out on the right. Okay, the last composition type that we're talking about is my personal favorite. It's like background, foreground, that kind of thing, like having something in the foreground of your image that is out of focus, but it's there kind of blurred as you're focused on whatever the subject is. Or vice versa, you have something in the background that's blurred, but it brings some interest to the image. So let's dive in and look at a few here. This is an example of, I was going to use this veil as a leading line to our couple. And then I was like, I'm actually going to bring my f-stop down really low, as low as I could. I think I had it at 1 point something. I can't remember. And it made it so that this was extra blurry. So you can't see any sort of definitive line to the couple here, at least not close up. But I liked it. I wanted to make it more of a foreground blur versus a clear line leading to them. And I really love this image. Their faces are cute, first of all, like her peeking up at him like that, and they just look happy. But I really like the dreaminess that it adds to this because, the veil's white and it's sheer. So it's kind of a foggy, misty kind of looking part of the photo. And the fact that it's so intentional too, it's not like it's just a small little corner, like there's just a blip of it. It's like, okay, it's taken up like a third of the photo. That means like, okay, this is intentional, and it's just an artistic way to approach shooting with a veil, which is cool. Here in this photo, we've got our beautiful bride, and closer to me is this tree, and its leaves and flowers were hanging down over the top of me here, between me and the bride. And I thought, okay, that's cool. I love the blurry colors of the, you know, the corally pink and this green from the leaves. Having that in the foreground, that pop of color, it makes me almost even more interested in her as a subject, because I'm having to look past something at her, and it almost kind of frames her a little bit too. Obviously there's nothing framing her, you know, on the sides or bottom, it's just on the top, but it does in a way create like almost a little arch where our eyes are drawn to her more. This is probably one of my all-time favorite photos, honestly, that I've ever taken, and it's of a little elephant figurine. This was a tablescape. There's this one elephant placed between these three glasses. So this is also an example of framing as well, where I had these three glasses, like they were perfectly surrounding this elephant, to where if I shot through them to the elephant on the table and they were blurry and the focus was on the elephant, then it creates this really cool blurry foreground that also is framing our subject. So, and I love how clean of an image it is. It's not like the tablecloth was like a crazy pattern or something. It's just a solid color. Yeah, we've got some florals and there's a little bit of a plate here on the left, but besides that, it's a relatively simple photo with minimal colors. There's, you know, just a few different colors in this versus a bajillion, you know, and so then it's not super distracting, and it's the kind of photo where you look at it and there's, to me, no doubt what the subject is, because not only is it framed, but it's also, you know, being shot through this blurry foreground, and there's not a lot of other colors or objects competing with it for attention. This is an example. This is just a couple's champagne glasses. They were getting ready and their champagne was sitting on there. And I was like, oh, I should capture this. So I just took a photo, just a really basic photo. I turned and I took a picture of their drinks. And then I thought, oh, the bubbles in her glass are really cool. It'd be cool to get like a closer up shot of that. And I almost went in to just get closer and take a picture. And then I was like, hey, wait, foreground. I should shoot with the other glass in the foreground blurry. So then I took this photo, and I love this because not only are we getting the cool detail of the etching of the glass, and look, there's the bubbles and everything and the condensation and reflection, but we also have this really cool artistic blurry foreground that draws our eye even more to this one, and it creates depth to the image. That's the thing about foregrounds and backgrounds and middle grounds is ultimately the goal is to create more depth in an image. You're already taking something, you're already fighting against the fact that it's a 2D image, object, whatever. Like, you're looking at something that's flat. My computer screen isn't displaying the glasses like this, but because of the way I shot this, it creates that illusion of depth. And so the previous photo, there's not a whole lot of depth. Everything is just about the same distance away from me, roughly. But this one, there's something this close and something that far, and that creates this really cool, just this illusion of distance in a way, and that makes a photo 10 times more interesting. Same thing with if you have photos that you're taking of a couple, let's say, in front of a building that's really cool. I would challenge you, put as much distance as possible between the couple and the building itself. The more you can put them on separate planes, the more interesting the photo is going to be. So the further they are from the building, the more distance there is, the better looking the photo is going to be, honestly, especially because then the background becomes even blurrier if you're keeping your f-stop low. If your aperture is at, 2.8 and you have your couple this close to you and the building's way back there, it's going to be quite blurry, which creates that sense of depth again, which to me immediately makes a photo look 10 times more professional, 10 times better. Here's another example of foreground, background, but also framing. There's this mirror at this wedding, and the couple really wanted me to take a photo of them in the reflection. And I did that where they were in focus, but then I was like, we got this really cool lettering on here with their names and the wedding date. I should have that be the focus, and just, it'd be kind of cute if they were blurry in the reflection. So this is an example of, you know, using blurry background, foreground. I don't even know what to call it when it's in a mirror. But also in framing, using the mirror. It's a very definitive object here, very precise edges or whatever, framing this couple. But they are blurry and the focus is technically on their names. So that's an image I really enjoy. All right, last but not least, we've got this really cool old statue in this garden at this chateau that we were at, and this couple is blurry in the foreground, and they're also creating framing. So the last couple photos here are doing some dual composition for you here. We got blurry in the foreground, but also they are perfectly framing, well, not perfectly, but very well framing this cool old Victorian looking statue in this garden with these flowers. And so it's also kind of a creative take, because this is a photo that very easily could have been taken with the couple in focus and this background blurry. But it creates an added layer of interest by making them blurry, them being the, you know, natural subject, most obvious subject in the image, making them blurry and choosing instead to focus on the statue behind them. It creates a really interesting and it becomes a creative choice that it becomes very interesting and artistic. And I personally really love this image. I did take a couple where they are in focus and they're really pretty photos, but this to me is way more interesting. It's like, oh, the photographer chose to not focus on the couple for this one, but hey, look at that statue. That's a really cool statue. What kind of place are they at that has statues? And there's like a garden and everything. Wow, what was this place? Like, it creates interest and it adds to this story in a way that just focusing on the couple wouldn't be able to do. So that is everything for me, all the examples I've got on composition for you guys today. I'd love to hear more about like what types of composition your guys' favorites are. That didn't make a lot of sense. I'd love to hear about what your favorite types of composition are. Are you a diehard rule of thirds person? Are you a diehard negative space person or leading lines or something? Is there a specific type of composition that you really love? Are you like me and you love messing with foreground? What is your favorite? And if you have examples, I'd love to see that stuff. I don't know how, but you should comment below and let me know what your favorite types of composition are. And if you have any thoughts, comments, critiques on the types of composition that I showed you here, or if you have any hot takes and different opinions, if you're like, rule of thirds is the worst, then I want to hear it. I'm curious. So let me know what you think, and can't wait to talk to you guys soon.